All right. Good morning, PT on Ice. Today is Monday, February 18th. My name is Mike Eisenhart. I'm the lead faculty for the APHPT set of courses and the Prevention, Health Promotion, Pop Health Division. This morning is President's Day, February 18th. It is President's Day and it is 8:30, so we're going to get rolling. A little bit of a tribute as I did last week. My final sip of coffee there, which says that we can get rolling. So let me start the timer and we'll get going. All right, so I got 15 minutes to tell you a little bit about, hey Colin, good morning, a little bit about this idea of becoming a low-key warrior. So, I chose that title today because I think it fits well with the day, right? It's President's Day. It's certainly a day that we stop and hopefully reflect a little bit about some of our past, if you're in the States, and some of our leaders, both past and current. And I've become kind of a history buff. I think PT on Ice actually has a lot to do with it. I hated history growing up. It never really bit me much. But I've actually really become, a fan and trying to learn more. And so, the whole history of the Teddy and JFK and all that stuff I talked about last year. But this year, it's kind of brought me a different direction. I think some of it has to do with the fact that I wind up often doing the PT on Ice in the holidays. But in general, today I thought I would just kind of follow up on last week's final thought. If you remember last week, if you listened, if you had a chance to be on or listen, you heard me talk a little bit about this idea that for me, this year would be the year of humility, right? Of being willing to kind of, make yourself small. This idea that there's something there, and I think there's a lot of things there for a lot of us. And it's an ironic thing, something that I haven't really ever shared with this crowd, this kind of faction of my life. I have lots of little folks that I kind of connect with, but I've never spent that much time, talking about this particular topic. But for me, growing up, I always had this kind of like deep sense that I wanted to be in some sort of a leadership role. That was like, and not like a thing that happened to me recently. This is like when I was a little kid, even, maybe second grade, first grade. I think it had to do with growing up with a certain level of pride, especially in my dad. My dad is a retired military guy. He's an Air Force guy, and so we kind of grew up with looking up to that. Both my grandfathers were World War II vets, and so there's a lot there. At any rate, so I grew up with this concept of leadership in my mind, and always sort of looked at the strong out front leader as kind of like who I wanted to be and who I wanted to become. And as I've grown up more and more, I've really realized that a lot of people are amazing leaders who are not out front. They're often behind the scenes getting a lot of things done. And I've learned a lot from watching those folks and kind of, it's helped me expand my mind and my ideas on this stuff. And I think that a big part of what we want to do in population health and trying to change, large groups of people, right? Remember, it's always important for me to point out, this is about the idea of really moving the herd. When I'm talking about moving a population, it's different than moving an individual. It's just, they're different animals entirely. That's precisely why we've split the courses out, right? So we've got a couple of courses now, and I know that, some of them are really, just getting started, and you might see those on the ICE website. But the reason why we broke them out was because you can't really speak to the individual and to the population at the same time. They behave differently. They're sort of different animals. And when it comes to groups, when it comes to kind of large populations, one of the things that we've had to kind of grip and wrestle with is the idea that they move differently. And so when you're thinking about designing systems, you're often thinking about leadership. You're thinking about how do I lead people to behave and move in a way that will actually help them later. And there's a lot to this. There's a lot of mathematical design, there's a lot of network design, there's a lot of reinforcement and nudge, there's a lot of social proof, there's a lot of talking to the right person with the right message at the right time. And so communication becomes an art form, not just something that you have to do, but it's critical. And so this idea that we have to kind of think about that really forces us to look within and say, well, am I up to the challenge? Am I good enough at leading people? Am I, doing it the way that particular group needs? Now, there are times, don't get me wrong, where the John Wayne out front, super leader, charge the hill kind of person is exactly the right person for the job. In extreme situations, for example, the command and control, like crisis, that is the perfect time for that. And that's been well documented, that in times of crisis, you don't want someone who's going to deliberate and mess around. You really want somebody who's willing to sort of know the direction and get people out of harm's way as fast as possible. What's interesting is that from a disease perspective, we are in crisis. If you look at the numbers, we are in crisis. And so you could make the argument that, hey, we need to charge the hill. We need strong, forceful, out front leaders to do that. And I guess I've kind of always believed that to a certain extent. But then I look back and I say, well, actually, when you're trying to get large groups of people to move, people value choice. They value the idea that I want to make the right decision for me and that I'm in control, right? There's kind of like this libertarian thing, in President's Day, there's this libertarian kind of like human thing that says, hey, we want to be able to make choices. And we could talk all about that, and that's kind of another lecture for another day. But what it's forced me to do is it's really forced me to say, well, is there a style here that I need to develop? Look within, look in the mirror and say, hey, is there something that I need to develop? And is there something that, am I just kind of like a symptom of the greater need? Like as professionals, is there something we need to develop? And I think that's really where the low-key warrior comes in, right? The idea of the person who is, so committed, so deeply rooted in their beliefs and what they're trying to do, that they are willing to submit to the fact that they are fighting for something bigger than themselves. And I think that's really hard and sometimes really scary, but I feel like that's the next level of development. And then if we're going to try to move the herd, if we're going to try to move the needle, we have to be of that kind of design, we have to be of that kind of build that we can look at ourselves and say, listen, there is not a question. You will never question whether or not I'm committed. Like I am so committed to the end goal that I'm willing to say I will take a step back and be humble and make myself small if that's going to help the team win. Now, I think that's an attitude that in many ways seems to be getting lost. And it's a perfect time to talk about it because, this year we lost one of our former presidents in George Bush. And George Bush actually was the commencement speaker at UConn the year that I graduated. And interestingly, not interestingly, I didn't pay attention. I can't remember a single thing the guy said. And that is ironic, wild almost. I actually saw one of my buddies from PT school on Facebook say something very similar, like, man, after he passed, like, I wish I remembered what he said. The truth is that we were so, pumped and excited about graduating and kind of so in that early part of our career and our life that we're going to take the world by storm, that we were much more concerned about us than the words of a leader. But, being now like a little mini history buff, what I did is I started to look into him. And one of the things that really struck me, and I don't know if everyone knows this story, is that as he is leaving the office, right, as he's finishing up his time as president, he writes a letter to Bill Clinton. And this is kind of like the stuff of lore at this point, but he's known for being sort of a handwritten letter guy. So he writes a handwritten note and leaves it for Bill Clinton, and it basically says along the effects of, hey, listen, like starting today, you are our president, and we're all behind you 100%. Right? Like now think about how like rough politics can be and how hard and how much, like two different ways of attacking the world. And there's a winner and a loser. And in this case, he was the loser. And you could easily fold your arms and say, no, I'm right, I'm out of here, you're completely wrong, we'll let time tell. But that's not what he does. He humbly says, it's bigger than me. This is about the country, this is about, our future, this is about our institutions. What I want you to know is, at this moment, from this point forward, I'm behind you 100%. Now talk about an amazing level of humility, right? It actually starts a trend. Clinton leaves one for George W. Bush, who leaves one for Obama, who leaves one for Trump. That's become like a historical thing now. People leaving, kind of a handwritten note in the desk. Now, this is not like a guy who's not, in a position to be the let's take the hill, brazen, hardcore leader. I mean, he was a fighter pilot who was rescued, shot down over Japan or something, became the head of the CIA. I mean, this is like a tough boy cowboy guy, right? But that's not how he behaves because he believes there's something bigger than him in it. And I think that as health professionals, there's a lot we can learn there. And I know that I'm going to try to spend some time this year learning it. Because if we're truly going to try to move the herd, if we're truly going to get people both at the individual level, right? Like I'm going to actually help you to get yourself organized and get your own thoughts organized so that you can become what you want to become. That's the individual level. And the group. I need a lot of those people working together, finding ways to get down the road where we want to go. If we're truly going to do that, we're going to have to be willing to say the cause is more important than my own personal needs. And I think that is a really hard thing today, right? Like I'm definitely dating myself when I say, in today's age, but that's what it feels like. In many ways, it feels that way. So what does that mean for us in my last 5 minutes here? And with any luck, I guess for you, I won't need the full 15 today. But what it means today for me is it's that idea that we spend some time thinking and designing and understanding that every single situation, requires us. It requires us to be deliberate in our approach with the end goal in mind. Like that's what's needed. We have to remember, take a step back and say, hey, we have to be willing. We have to be willing to step back and decide what's the single most important thing that we are after. And whatever that is, understand that it may not be the most direct route that we get there. That to me is, being humble. That is being a low-key warrior. Like, look, you can expect me to fight. You can expect me to show up ready. You can expect me to have armor in hand, right? Like I mentioned last week, lay down your armor and look at yourself. But yeah, like when the fight goes down, when we're ready to engage, you can expect I will be there 100% full force. However, knowing full well that along the way, we may take detours. That it may not be as straight a shot up the hill as we want to believe. And I think that the minute we embrace that, the minute we allow that, in ourselves, is the minute we will actually put some cause bigger than ourselves. And that is when we will accelerate into the position that we want. I saw some stuff, I got tagged in a post this past weekend on Facebook and a lot of banter back and forth. And it's like, I kind of like put it in the bucket of, yep, this is therapist banter. We just, we kind of bounce these things back and forth off each other. And, come 6 months later, there'll be the exact same conversation happening. Why? Because everyone's digging in on their particular thought instead of saying, hey, what's the cause we're after? How can we all, practice some level of humility and then let's move the whole ball forward? It's super frustrating. It's super frustrating. And I find myself wanting to back off of that, step back from that further and further and further. And the main reason why is because there's no likelihood of success there. It's a very low likelihood of success. Whereas I find people in other places, and I'm not going to, mention anybody by name or by faction, but I find people in other places who are simply about the end goal. They say, look, we're going to try to fix this. I've seen some companies out there who have flat out said, we are going to prevent and reverse blank, fill in the blank, this disease. And that's why they exist. And they get up every day to do that. And when they get up every day to do that, they are willing to say, okay, this might be the right strategy for the time, for where we're at today. And that may not be my first inkling, my first thought. But my second thought seems to be the right thought because I agree with you. At this moment, this group needs this information at this time to move the ball one step further. And if we do that, then the generation behind us maybe, or the people who come behind us, we can write them a handwritten note and leave it for them and humbly say, we've given it our all. We've pushed the ball down the field a little bit. We've tried to leave the place a little better than we found it. We know you are now set up to take it even one step further. Okay? Like that's how we tackle complex problems. That's how we get major things done. By never ever wavering on where we're trying to go. That part we never waver on. That's the warrior piece. We never ever waver on that. Be very clear. We are trying to prevent and reverse chronic disease. We are trying to free that yoke. We are trying to lift the burden. Not only in the U.S., but in all people. Right? Like that's an unnecessary, preventable burden, and it takes ridiculous leadership at every level. It could be leadership at the very highest level. Sure, if you're in a position to do that, fantastic. It could be leadership at the very lowest level. It could be leadership in what you do in the conversations you have today with your clients or your family members or around your kitchen table or with a friend at a coffee shop. Okay, but it's laying down that strong narrative, that warrior. Like, look, we never waver on that, but understanding there might be 1,000 ways to get there, and being a low-key warrior when that is required. And I think that's where we're at right now. All right, so I'll leave it there in my 48 seconds. Hopefully you can make some sense of this. I see Alan put something up. Don't confuse being soft with seeing the other guy's point of view. Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect quote. Thanks, Alan. I love that. I think the point is very clear, right? I hope, and in my convoluted, mad sciencey way, it's just that where we're at the point of development that we are at in trying to attack this problem of moving the needle on health, which is hard and complex. That's where we're at. Okay, if we're going to do that, we have to be absolutely strong on our cause. Never waver, ever. Winston Churchill, a la Winston Churchill. But yet we can take some inspiration from some of our more humble leaders, especially on a day like this in President's Day, who we can step back and say, hey, they made major things go down. They made major change, and they did so in a way that got everyone to win, that got us all closer to the cause. And if we're doing that every day, we're making even a baby step forward. We're getting it done. All right, it's only Monday. It's President's Day, but it's still Monday nonetheless. I know there are some people who have the day off. I hope that's for you. Maybe take some time to reflect on this. And if it's not, if you're working today, get after it and get after it strong. But either way, it's only Monday. Make it count.